Hey everybody, welcome back to another 21st Century Renaissance and another open interest newsletter breakdown on GameStop. I'm your host, Dr. Michael LoPiano, and we are off to another down week for GameStop. That's what it looks like. Can we expect much more downside? We're going to be thinking about that question today. A little bit more extemporaneously. We can't seem to get access. Something's going on here with X. I haven't been able to post an article today, so we're just we're gonna do a live. We're gonna do a live Bill Riley style here on 21st Century Renaissance Open Interest Newsletter Breakdown. We will start, as is our way, with our continued reading from the book of Genesis, continuing on in the life of Abraham, or Abram as he is yet still in this point in his life. You recall, right, what did we talk about last time? We talked about this episode where he and his cousin Lot, his nephew Lot, come up out of Egypt. They become somewhat wealthy. Their herds begin to grow and expand. Of course, the people of God in the origin here, right, of Genesis, they are shepherds. They are herdsmen. And although there is such a concept of wealth that is outside of herds and cattle, right, we have talked about, of course, numerous times that it is really, money is an abstraction. Money is something that evolves. The idea of capital is something that evolves out of shepherding. The keeping of herds and our entire basic language and our metaphors that we have, although we may not realize this, are developed out of the tending of flocks, out of the tending of herds. Of course, capital itself coming from the Latin word caput, meaning head. Animals, of course, being counted by head. Money is something that, capital is something that comes from this, right? So we have heads and tails on coins, things like this. So capital is emergent for this, and of course, many of the principles that go along with, right, the understanding of the management of capital, the management of herds, investment, multiplication, compound interest, sacrifice. These sorts of things. So Abram and Lot become very wealthy. They have to go their separate ways. Abram decides, you know what, I'm going to go ahead. Lot actually makes the first decision, right? Lot decides he's going to go down to the plain. He's going to camp by this city of wickedness, Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abram's going to stay up on the mountain, right? He's going to stay up on the mountain over by Bethel, meaning the house of the Lord, this place where he consecrated an altar to God. So let's take a look at where we end up here in our story. I will abridge this a little bit. We do have a lot of names, a lot of tribal names and such that can sort of weigh down the tempo of reading here. So, and it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, and Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and king of Bela, which is Zoar. And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same is Zoar. And they joined battle with them, these other kings, in the vale of Siddim, with Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings with 5. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountain. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their victuals, that is, their food, and went their way. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, the brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abraham, that is, his allies. And when Abram heard that his brother had been taken captive, that is, his nephew, he armed his trained servants born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan, that is, the land of Dan. And he divided himself against him, he and his servants, by night, and smote them, and pursued them unto Hobach, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother, that is, his nephew, Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. And the king of Sodom went out to meet with him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer, and the kings that were with him at the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale, which is the king's valley. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand, and gave him tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons, and take the goods to thyself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lift up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldst say, I have made Abram rich. Save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion. So we have this episode again. It is an important episode which sets up this life of Abram. We sort of see Abram willing to do battle in order to rescue those who are dear to him, rescue his kinsmen. Right? He understands that, right, in a certain way. Right? What is visited upon Lot, it's not exactly, he's not exactly deserving of it. But I don't know. You set up your tents and your flocks and stuff by some places of wickedness. I mean, maybe you're going to get wrapped up in, I don't know, some pitched battles. It do be like that sometimes. But what we really see of Abram, which I think is really, if you had to boil this down to a moral or some sort of bit of wisdom to take away from it, Abram, in pursuing this, right? I mean, he is victorious. He goes out. He does what he must do. He sacrifices the potential of his life, right? He endures great hardship for the sake of his kinsmen. He is rewarded for it by those he helps. But very interestingly, right, he refuses to take more than is his due. He refuses to take more than he set out to achieve. This is very key, right? So he goes out, he gets Lot back. He's given a gift of some tithes, but he only accepts some small portion that is necessary for the feeding of his men and for the men of his allies. Everything else he gives back to these vanquished kings. He gives it all back, right? And he has this phrase, lest it should be said that I made thee rich. Right? He says, lest it should be said, I have made Abram rich. You know? So this accomplishes two things, right? One of them, I would say, has a sort of psychological wisdom to it, and another one, a social wisdom to it. One of them is, if you set out to achieve something, I think about this in the context of trading, for example. This is a hugely important principle that I think about when trading and investing. Okay. Number one, when you set out with a goal, define the terms of your success. What is success going to look like? Like, for example, one thing that I set as a goal for myself is I try to average over the course of a year. When I am trading, I say $1 per share of GameStop per month. That's my average. I want to average that over the whole course of the year. I want to average that per month, $1 per share per month. Now, that's a very ambitious goal, but right, that's a defined goal. If I get more than that, if that so happens, okay. But my actions, the actions that I take, are always steps towards that particular goal and that carefully delineated objective, let's say. If I say, okay, well, this is sure to help me reach this particular goal, I accept this. I don't try to go past that. Okay. This is very important when trading. I think a lot of folks that I talk to, right, who get involved, who try to do things like, gamble long options, or they take on more leverage, they go into trades, or they stay in trades longer than they should. Part of the issue is, number one, they don't go in setting a very clear target. They don't say, this is how much I want to get from this trade. They go, I could make a whole bunch of money and become a rich person if I do this trade. How do you know when to get out, right? With that type of approach, you do not know when to get out of the trade. You don't know when to take what you've got. You don't know if what you've got is good enough, right? You say, well, it could go more. It could go more. If you leave it open-ended like that, you get into, I used to do this too, right? You get into this thought pattern. Well, maybe it goes higher. Well, maybe it goes higher. Maybe it goes higher than this. And it's like, well, maybe it does. Do you think it does? Do you have a good case for it to do so? Is that specifically what what do you mean by higher, right? Twice as high? 50% higher? What do you mean? Right? So define, right? The idea is to try to anticipate and define what you think is going to happen, and then estimate the probabilities of whether that's going to happen, and try to take advantage of that, try to capture value from that once you get an idea that, yeah, okay, this crosses some sort of a threshold where I think, yeah, in terms of probability, it's going to work out in my favor. So Abram goes out with the objective to rescue his kinsman. He ends up with a little bit more than that, right? He ends up, right? He gets gifts from Melchizedek. He gets tithes as a gift from the people he saves, which is nice, right? He doesn't go out and ask for that. But in the course of battle, he also ends up with everything that he took from the armies that he vanquished. But he elects to give it back. He elects to give it back. And the rationale he provides, right? He says, lest thou should say, I have made Abram rich. So this is where that, right? So what sort of starts out as a psychological aim. He has a very clear aim. He's able to go ahead and rescue his cousin. It results in excess resources. He gets more than he aimed for, but he realizes, you know what? There's a social component to this, and if I push my luck here, if I really try to take the fullest possible advantage of this situation, this might not work out for me down the road. Okay. That idea, lest thou should say, I have made Abram rich. This is the idea that, well, Abram took these things from me. Abram has wounded me. Abram has wounded us. Abram has, right? So this sets up this possibility for vendetta. We've already talked about how important that is, and mitigating vendetta, mitigating this type of situation is very important for Genesis. Is very important for the people whose stories are compiled into the book of Genesis. It's very important. Very important to the editors of this text, right? So it's very important to many people who are working on this collection of wisdom. So it's also important here to Abram. Okay, and he has the good, what would you say, judgment? He has the good foresight. He is prudent insofar as he is able to see that this may be an issue down the road, and so he mitigates it. And he says, you know what? I got what I came for. Not only did I get what I came for, I got more than I came for. I've got food now to feed my men, so we could, and the men of my allies, men who came here to help me with this. Everything else, you can have back. This is what I came for, right? This is my part. And so he's gambling here. He's saying, right, in a certain sense, I'll make you a trade. Okay, I just beat you in battle. I can take this stuff. But you know what? What I really came here to do, the only reason I fought you in the first place was to get my kinsman back. Right? I helped out these people. They gave me lots of gifts. Fine by me. But I'm not going to also take your stuff. In fact, I'm going to give you back your stuff so that you'll kind of like me, right? I could take it, and then you can be bitter about it down the road and maybe plot to find some way to get it back from me. But tell you what, I'm just going to skip that. I'm just going to give you all the stuff that I took from you. I'm just going to give it back. And all you have to do in return is not harbor some sort of desire for vengeance against me and my kin. You let me take my kin. You let me take the gifts from these people here. And then that's it. Right. So it's important. You'll hear this kind of wisdom show up a lot in kind of, you'll have like World War II revisionists or something will say things like, or Napoleon revisionists are like, if only, the different armchair generals will think, if only Napoleon hadn't invaded Russia, if only, Hitler hadn't invaded Russia or something like that. What might have happened? They speculate on this type of thing, or think about the consequences of deciding to do this. It's a popular bogeyman sort of thing in our mythology of the 19th and 20th centuries. This idea, the from a military history perspective, armchair general perspective, the conquest that might have been, something like that. And so it's easy to kind of have that in hindsight say, oh, I shouldn't have taken this one step too far. Same thing in trading. You can have that kind of, I got greedy, right? You hear that all the time. I got greedy. It's like, well, okay, how do you head that off? What's the actual thing you have to do psychologically in order to head that off? Both if you're going to trade, if you're going to invest, if you're working in some deal, with somebody, you're trying to build some relationship, some project in the world, what do you have to do right ahead of time? And it's figure out what you want ahead of time. Be very clear with yourself and with others about what you want. That's number one. And then when you get what you want, when you get that thing, don't push your luck. Especially if you've got more than you set out for. Don't push your luck. Realize where you are, right? Realize the position that you've been afforded. You've got what you asked for. When you get what you've asked for, step away from the table. Right? Cash out. Important lessons certainly that I use every single day. Every single day when training. That's a hugely important factor, I would say, in helping me become a successful trader, a profitable trader. Okay. So we did promise we would talk about GameStop today. So we will do this. Like I said, for some reason, Twitter's not loading posts. It's not loading my article. I can't bring it up. I can't write my article. I can't publish my article today. So we will. I can't even bring up the kind of weekly outlook from yesterday. So like I said, we just kind of do this overview kind of live. So I would say the first thing I want to take a look at here is this. There's a new indicator. I forget exactly which user this is from. I don't think it's Ultimate. It's Greg 0874. Hello, Greg 0874. Some folks sent this my way, and I wanted to go ahead and bring some attention to this. Really, I mean, it gives us some lower floor bounds here. And really, if you go ahead and kind of just do our cash per share calculation based on the current Bitcoin valuation, so if you do gross cash per share plus the current Bitcoin value, we're looking at basically what our price is now. I think there's a very strong case that is just how we're being valued right now. And I also, this is non-dilutive, so this is at 447 million. We've got a couple things below here. So we've got the 2030 carry floor, which he's got on the books, and then he's got net cash per share plus Bitcoin, which is a lot lower. Right? That's a lot lower. 11.02 that essentially values the business and future earnings at absolutely nothing, and treats all of the free cash as just debt. So I think there's probably some kind of maybe a more realistic valuation, let's say, for a floor. I think the kind of cash, the gross cash plus Bitcoin, right? That works. At least it's working for now. Our price is there. But is that really, our lower bound there, or should we be looking at some kind of other factor to gauge whether we're going to go down much lower? I spent some time taking a look at our monthly charts, right? I mean, Roaring Kitty was pretty good about kind of doing this whole zoom out thing. A lot of folks have been talking to me about some longer term indicators. So I decided to take a look at this here, and I would say, right, if we look at our monthly chart, so what was going on monthly wise? All right, so the whole sneeze stuff, all the 2021 stuff, just absolutely blew out all of our moving averages way out on the monthly chart. Okay, so that's a pretty good signal, right? That we're pretty overbought at that point, to say the least. And what does seem to be the case is, we have our moving average cluster here. This is our 20, our 20 count, our 20, our 50, our 100, and our 200 count. There is no 500 count for months because GameStop has not existed, as far as I know, has not existed for 500 months yet. Something like that. It doesn't show up on this chart. We don't have a 500 month moving average. So I mean, I spent some time going back, taking a look, right, with Roaring Kitty, remember drawing that line on the chart. And, okay, we had some prior reference levels here, but I would say also, right, so yeah, it lines up basically with this monthly candle. The low on this monthly candle was 963, low on this monthly candle here, 995, so very close. But what I would say too is it also looks like we use the 200-month moving average as a mega ultra super deep support. That's what that looks like to me. And basically going forward, we've never spent more than like a week or two over any of this cluster of moving averages. So even if you were to just trade GameStop, for example, on this monthly chart, you were to buy, let's say, on one of these lower supports. So you were to buy, for example, for the past year and a half, right? If you bought basically off of the 20-month moving average, you'd catch the low. If you put in, essentially, this is almost exactly right. If you put in whenever it was here, so here back in August, it was like 1875. If you put it in just at the level of this moving average, pretty good chance you're gonna get the low, maybe out a little bit there, enter a little bit early, but you get your lows. And then just wait until we go out and up and over all of our moving averages. And as soon as you're on the other side of this, this went really kind of way up there. This kind of way up there. So not great for timing exactly what the high is, but picking it up at the 20 and then selling it above the 50 here, that's a lot of really good trades, right? That's a lot of really good trades here. So if you bought it here, sell here, wait, pick it up here, sell here. And right, I think our convertible bond offerings, our convertible bond offerings in each case brought us to this level. Okay. So the August low, the kind of Nikkei crash last year, the post September offering low, these went down to the 20-month moving average. Then the move down from the January high of this year to the 20-month moving average. Convertible bond offering, right, brought us back down exactly to that spot. Second convertible bond offering, back to that level. What seems to be the case, however, here is this got a little bit of traffic here. A little bit of traffic here as we see the 50-month and the 20-month kind of converging on one another. Not crossing yet, but about to cross. So on the one hand, we can take a look and we can think about the fundamentals underlying this possible gross cash plus Bitcoin valuation. We did hang out around that pretty closely. Bitcoin got pretty low. We'll take a look at the Bitcoin chart in a second here. But I would say kind of our next step down as a support is probably something like, right, because we got really hung up on here for a lot of months, for about half the year back in 2023, which by the way, right, that's the last time we saw some of these values we're looking at. Last time we were this oversold on our RSI daily was back at this point exactly in 2023. So we went down to this 100-month moving average and then we rebounded pretty hard, right? So we went from, what was our low? A low of 12. And then by mid-December, we went back to 19. So pretty good. That's about a 50 to 60% move there in a couple weeks. Could we see something like that? I think it's possible. But would we need to kind of go ahead and touch that level? I think also to get something that dynamic, maybe. But I can see this as basically what I think our next lower bound would be. And where is that right now? $17.99, around $18. Around $18. What would that mean for our market cap? Bitcoin would really kind of have to sell off there. But I don't know. Did they magically just add a discount to the cash pile? I don't know exactly how that works, or why that valuation makes sense logically, let's say, but it doesn't necessarily have to work purely by what sounds reasonable. That's not necessarily how valuations work. But I would say if we go over to Bitcoin, oh boy, I think, yeah. If we go over to Bitcoin, we have, yeah, we go down to, yeah, we didn't quite touch it. We just kind of pulled up here. I think basically in pre-market trading or overnight trading essentially tonight, but right down to that 20 months. So, it looks like this is a good spot for us to kind of rebound. If we don't, we go to 55,000. But how long would that take? A month? Do we just dump for a whole month? Bitcoin's never done that. But I would say at the very least, the last time we had this type of move back in 2022, we got hung up for about 4 months. It was only right. So we didn't immediately fall through this level. In fact, in history, have we done that? Have we just kind of immediately fallen through this level? No, right? And as we start to go back into 2018, have we done this? No, we did not immediately fall through this level. I think we kind of got hung up a number of times for a lot of months. And only then afterwards did it fall through back to the 50 month. Earlier, no, except very, very early, maybe back in 2014. But so I would say at the very least, we're probably looking at something of a hang up there. So I'm not, historical precedent says we find some support at around 87,000, kind of at the lowest. Already kind of looks like we've bounced a bit there, and then maybe we hang out on top of this for a little while, get something of a slight recovery. So I mean that should help prevent us from basically falling apart to the downside. Also for GameStop, what I would say is, though I think there is a chance that we go down to 18, that would need to happen pretty quickly, I think. Earnings will be good. That is going to be something of a relief valve for some of this downward pressure. Earnings periods, especially when they're good. I mean, we move to the upside for one reason or another. Not sure why it happens. Some sort of a repricing can occur under these circumstances. Earnings does tend to matter. So if we're looking like we are, let's say, what was the catalyst for this 2023 correction? I think it was something, it was earnings in 2023, which was better than expected for quarter three, but not so much to cause that type of repricing, but we had a kind of volatility event like that in the first place. So what do I think going into the end of November? What do I think going into December? Well, probably going to stay muted, even if we don't say dive down to 18. If we are going to dive down to 18, I'd probably say that's going to give it maybe a week or two by the end of November. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen in that range. And then I think early December, we start creeping out of that. And then I think earnings on December 9th, right, that's going to be something big coming out of the hole there. I would not anticipate something really, really major, like a really huge overextension, let's say over, that kind of 25 to 28 range again. Unless we see 18. If we see 18, I think something like that's on the table. If we don't see 18, I think kind of our upside move for that period is kind of go back to around the Q2 level, something like that, only to have another down cycle going back into the end of March. And then end of March is when I think we're going to have, that's the real price up. That's the real price up. That's the real recalculation, let's say, of what our next year is going to look like. If GameStop can show some really, really killer earnings growth, if it can show revenue growth, again, right, important as far as why we're not getting revenue multiples, why we're not getting these big kind of growth multiples and future earnings multiples, like some of the sector companies out there, is we're just not showing revenue growth yet. The potential is there. GameStop has flashed some very excellent signs in terms of what's going on with power packs, in terms of what's going on with console revenue. But until that revenue actually starts coming in, right, they've suggested investment, but we don't have any direction or forward guidance on where that's going to go. When GameStop can show something can show revenue growth and can show something of a trend of projected revenue growth, once analysts can look at a chart and say like, wow, this looks like it's turning into an exponential growth curve, something like that, then the algorithms are free to then price us up to these much higher multiples. But until then, we just kind of sit at whatever this kind of cash value is, the just asset value of the company, plus a little bit of a multiple in terms of what's going on in terms of our revenue and core business and such. So going into November OPEX, what am I looking at? It's very bearish. I think I talked about this. I did talk about this in yesterday's article. If Twitter is working for you, you can go see that. I can't see my own publication, so go take a look if you have a chance. It is linked down below. But yeah, options wise, right? Max pain, I believe, is at 2150. We had a lot of bearish stuff come in last Friday. Like 11,000 short, like net short calls were sold at $21 going into this week. Past 14 days, I mean, just in general, put volume is shifted toward the ask. So going into November OPEX, it's not looking like we get the recovery this week. Maybe coming out of this week, going into next week, we get a little bit of a reprieve. But I would really say that even from an options perspective, probably not looking at recovery until much closer to the end of the month, into the kind of lead up to quarter three earnings report on December 9th. So it's a little bit of a ways off, right? We've got let's see, I think 1.5. No, we've got, let's see, December. Yeah, we've got OPEX week, last week in November, which is the 28th, I think. Then we've got 28th expiry. We've got December 5th, and then we've got the 12th. Okay, so yeah, still a few trading weeks, 2.5 maybe before I think we really start getting into that kind of earnings appreciation territory. Maybe 2, maybe 1.5, something like that. But right, we don't typically see too much volatility start to work in until 2 weeks before. Really no more than that unless we're dealing with the annual earnings. So that's going to be around the 25th. Actually, so we should start seeing some of that effect. We might start seeing some of it beginning essentially kind of a week from today. Maybe it'll start getting priced in. So it's going to take some patience. That's, GameStop, right? Quite patience is the name of the game. Part of the reason the stock is discounted is because you have to pay a price in patience. You either pay it in capital or you pay it in patience. So for many folks invested in the company, they've been paying for quite a long time in patience in order to be able to have shares, let's say, at these discounted values. So good luck out there today. Good luck with that patience side of the investment. And we'll look forward, of course, to seeing you guys shortly. So thanks very much, as always, for watching and listening. We'll catch you next time.